Welcome to Guy Code, a podcast dedicated to imparting dad wisdom to my son, with your host, Koji Steven Sakai, and friends.
All righty. Welcome. This is Koji, and this is episode number 52. I wanted to impart all of my wisdom to my son, but of course, my son already thinks he knows more than me. So instead of trying to tell him now and having it go one ear and out the other ear, I decided to record them here with the hopes that maybe, just maybe, when he's ready, he'll listen to my advice in the future and not make the same stupid mistakes I did. I'll also bring on guests like I have today to impart their advice as well. I have no doubt that their advice will be better than my advice. This week, I brought on writer, director, producer, and I just found out teacher, Michael Sloman. Michael, how are you?
Great, Koji. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. Glad to have you here, Brian.
Yeah.
Sorry, Michael. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Michael. Besides from being a filmmaker, I'm also a high school English teacher. Been teaching for about 7 years now. Before that, I was substitute teaching. So that's been my go-to day job for quite a while now. Kind of runs my family. My father was a high school teacher, taught business and business math. And my grandfather, who's passed away a long time ago, he was a phys ed director at the local Jewish community center for a long time. And he started up summer camp there not too long after Holocaust happened. And a lot of Jewish immigrants were coming to America or were in America already and, trying to assimilate given that time period. And he created pretty much a safe haven for kids at that time period. So I've always admired that about him and always tried to emulate that, both my grandfather and my father as an educator myself.
Yeah, teaching is a skill. I think it's very challenging. I mean, your job probably is way harder than my job, but it's just I've always impressed. I always feel, although I do feel that middle school kids are the worst kids of all the kids to teach, because when I subbed, I like little kids because I could scare them still and they're cute. And then the older kids, like the late high school, I usually, if I could treat them like adults, they usually step up to be adults. Not always, but the middle school kids were like, they're too old to be scared of the adults, but they're too young to be mature. And they're like all their hormones and they want to like hump everything. Like, and they think they know everything. Those were the worst kids.
Yeah, they're dead smack in the middle of both extremes.
Yeah.
So they're in essence the most extreme of both. So yeah, I can appreciate that. I taught 8th grade for a couple of years. I liked 8th grade because I agree with you, like 6th grade, 7th grade, it's like really they're all kind of sweaty and just kind of germy and everything and, just rambunctious as hell. But I think when they get to 8th grade, they're still they're still kiddish, but, they're starting to become more of an adolescent.
Yeah.
So they're fun. I had a good time with that. One of my favorite years as an English teacher, my 7-8 years I've taught was 1 year for 8th grade. So it was really my first year I started to develop my own curriculum, because prior to that I had to follow the curriculum with the teachers I co-taught with or what the school administration expected. So that year was 2016 to 2017. I really got to teach my own curriculum for English and brought in topical literature that was, gave students insight into literature from other cultures that wasn't usually their own. So that's always been my style to, have literature in the classroom that is, not just one-sided, myopic, of the American experience, but multiple narratives of the American experience.
I remember, can I share a quick story about English class?
Yeah.
I went from a private school to a public school in 11th grade, 11th grade. And the school I was going to had a predominantly Asian immigrants from Asia. And so I was like one of the few like Asian Americans that would come to the school. And so they wanted to give me an English test. but like I was going to like an elite private school, like a elite prep school, like one of the best schools in the country kind of prep school, to like this public school, which is still a really great public school, but it was just public school. And so I remember they're like, they wanted to give me an English test, and they're like, I'm like, I don't need an English test. I'm fine. Like I'm fine. Trust me. I could speak English. And they're like, what book have you read? And I was like, I read this Zen on the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance recently. They're like, I've never heard that book. And I was like, well, that's you, not me. Like, that's a really I it's a philosophy book. And they're like, but they still made me take the test, which was really insulting. But anyway,
right.
I just remember
What was the name of the book?
Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of the word Zen, but I never heard of
No,
being connected with motorcycle maintenance.
So it's this guy named Robert Pirsig. He wrote, it's from the 1970s. It's one of the classic philosophy books. It really encapsulates the history of philosophy in this kind of adventure. So the story is about this man, this father who's going on a cross-country trip with his son who is autistic, and they're going on a cross-country trip with on a motorcycle, and he's kind of going insane because he's thinking about all these crazy philosophy ideas, and how the more he thinks about it, the more it makes him crazy. But it's really, I mean, it's an amazing book. I've probably read it like 20 times in my life. It's like something that I keep reading, going back to, because it is such a, to me, it's such an important work. It's one of the, I think, most important works of American philosophy for sure. But anyway, enough about Zen.
That's cool. No, I could appreciate that though. I'm gonna text you later about that. I want that in case I forget the title.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like it's a father-son story too.
It is. Well, it is. But that's like it's a very surface level like story about him not connecting with it. Like once you like, it's basically the idea of like once you start to really think about things like really heavy that he does, you start to disconnect with other people, and he has a hard time connecting with his son, who I think is autistic. Like I believe is autistic a little bit, and he has trouble trying to connect to other people, because it's just like this idea of, you know, what is truth, what is reality, what is, you know, what is perfect, like what is good versus what is not good, not like as in good and evil, but just like what has quality and what doesn't have quality, you know. It's a really difficult, it's a very challenging book to get through. I mean, I'm sure you'll be fine, but it's a very challenging book to get through because it's not a riveting book about him going across the country. You know, a lot of it goes into these like really long, incredibly long tangents that, you know, when I was younger, I don't think I really understood. And sometimes I still don't understand the book. And I spent a lot of time, there's like even guides to this book that you could like, learn about the history behind like what he's talking about. Like this is from like Aristotle or something, you know, whatever it is. And you could go through and look at it. But anyway, we're here not for my book advice, but we're here for your life advice. So why don't you get us started? Why don't you tell us?
That's so good. Yeah, sure. I think, you know, something that's been passed down from my father to me is you catch more flies with honey than you do vinegar. I'm sure many people have heard that idiom before. I always thought it was more bees with honey, and it makes sense that it should be more bees with honey, but it really is more flies with honey. I would rather, I don't know, for some reason, I'd rather attract bees than flies. I don't know, bees seem more attractive than a fly.
Yeah.
You know, bees get to pollinate with beautiful flowers. The flies are flying around and pooping.
Yeah.
Whatever
bees
else.
will sting you though.
Garbage.
So, yeah, that's nice.
Well, if you provoke them, they'll sting you.
Yeah.
Mostly, right? So you just gotta be nice to them, which is kind of, you know, catch more flies with honey part.
And how do you live that?
I don't know. I think it's.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Right. No. I was going to go right into that. So I find it very helpful at work, in my professional life as a teacher, because you have administration that can kind of be micromanaging you sometimes. You have parents you have to deal with. You have your students who are young and impressionable. You don't want to make a bad impression on them because then they won't want to learn from you. So I always try to carry that practice with me with everybody I interact with at school. Sometimes I'll be in one of my type of moods. Sometimes I like to be on my own, not to be bothered if I'm on my break or something. But I still try to maintain that politeness to a degree that, you know, I'm listening to you. If you say something to me, I'm not going to ignore you, you know. But then when I am more interactive, you know, I try to I just try to be as respectful and polite as possible. If my principal or my supervisor, my literature department, says she wants me to do X, Y, and Z, instead of arguing with her, why do I have to do that? Why do I have to do that? No, that's unnecessary, blah, blah, blah. I just say, yeah, sure, no problem. They tend to leave me alone when I do that. If I argue with them a little bit more, then they're gonna be like, why are you not coming on board with what we're trying to get you to do? And then they get write-ups and whatever else come from there, So it's just better to just be polite as much as possible.
And you're a father.
Not to be a pushover.
Yeah. And I know you're a father. So how do you teach this to your child, or how will you want to teach this to your child?
I think it's a better of how will I want to teach it, because he's not even 2 years old yet.
Yeah, he's too young now.
Yeah, but I do. Right now with COVID, we don't go out a lot, so he doesn't see me interact with a lot of people. But we had a snowstorm. I live in upstate New York, by the way, and we've had a lot of snow this winter so far, and we had a really big snowstorm back in December. It was the biggest one so far of the year, and I live in an apartment complex, and my whole path to the cars was filled with snow. Couldn't get out. My neighbors, who are all young ladies, they asked to borrow my shovel so they could shovel a path. And I was like, yeah, sure, here's a shovel. And then my wife brought up a good point. Why don't you, your son is watching. Why don't you go extend the courtesy and shovel the path for them? And I was like, you know what? You're right. So I went out and shoveled the path for them. And, it's setting examples like that is really important, because it was the right thing to do. It was the polite thing to do. It was the chivalrous thing to do as well. So just living by my actions, trying to, just do the right thing. But like I said, he really doesn't see me a lot out in public with other people.
Yeah, it's funny because
really.
When you were talking, I was thinking about I knew this Japanese American veteran from the Military Intelligence Service, the MIS, and I was talking to him during the Abu Ghraib scandal when American soldiers were torturing the Iraqi soldiers and Iraqi prisoners. Do you remember that back maybe like a decade ago? Probably. They were taking all those pictures and doing really terrible things to them. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is this military intelligence guy I was talking to, this veteran who's probably 80 or 90 at the time. And I was talking to him about it. He said, that's terrible, because, he interrogated Japanese soldiers. He told me, and he talked about how he could beat the crap out of them, or they could beat the crap out of these soldiers. But he said the information they got was not good, that they would be all wrong or semi-wrong, but so their method would, they just talk to them. They talk about their families. They talk about their life and their home life, and tell them they're not going to hurt them, and just get to know them and become friends with them. And over time, they got all the information they ever needed from these guys without ever laying a finger on them. And he told me that was the best way to ever get real information, was to make a real human connection and be nice. So it's in that same kind of vein of like, yeah, sure, you could beat the crap out of him with a gun or strip him and torture him, but the kind of information that you get is not necessarily the best kind of information that could actually lead to real intelligence. I know that's an extreme example. Obviously, we're not in that situation, but it's the same theory, right? Of that, thankfully. like if you if you're mean to people, you might get what you want, but you might not get exactly what you want because they're doing it under duress, as opposed to because you're being nice, or you're being friendly, or being chivalrous, right?
Right. And there could always be just negative consequences that could come out of any hostile behavior one exhibits towards any other person.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's always frustrating about
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, even
I forgot what I was saying. You can.
Oh, I was gonna say, even Trump's, when he does former President Trump does his negotiations is all I talked to my son about this. His negotiations are always like, I'm gonna take advantage of you and I'm gonna screw you. And I'm like, those are the worst kinds of negotiations. Yeah. The best negotiations, in sports or anywhere, is where you want both sides to feel like they got the best deal. That's the deal that will lead to next time. And you want to keep having deals. You don't want to if I screw you, I'm never trading you again. Like in sports, say, I'm never going to be able to trade you again because I just took advantage of you. I just took advantage of a moment or a time. And, and even in business dealings, I don't want to screw somebody. I want them to feel like they got a good deal. Even if I'm trying to ask for something free, I don't want it to feel like they're giving me something free. I want to make sure that they're getting what they want to get as much as I'm getting what I want to get as well for whatever price I'm trying to get it for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're both filmmakers. I think you have a lot more experience than I do, but I've been in the game for a little over a year now, and I know that when it comes to, casting the talent for my films that I'm doing, the relationship aspect is so important, because I'm on a micro budget for these films that I'm making right now until later on when they become more of a big deal. But it's laying that groundwork. I always admire directors and just, producers like Adam Sandler or Martin Scorsese, how they always have the same actors in their films, I always wanted to emulate that if I became in a lead directorial or producer role. So maintaining those relationships, taking care of your people is so important,
All right, well, let's hear your second piece of advice.
Sure. So you're responsible for your actions alone. You're going to find in relationships you wish you could change things about your partner or, friendships, but I'm thinking more in relationship status or just people that are, not even just with a spouse or a significant other, but, people you have to work with, people that are antagonistic towards you. You can't control them. That's beyond your that's beyond your limit. What you can control is yourself and your response. It's a very difficult principle to develop. I still struggle with it myself, but when you can get to a certain point in that understanding of that principle, it's very liberating.
Yeah, that's amazing. Actually, it's funny that you mentioned that because I literally was just having before this meeting, I was talking to my son about this. So my son is really amazing. He's an amazing baseball player, and he's just joined a travel team, and he just got recruited for this team. And one of the things I was trying to explain to him about baseball is that baseball is one of the few sports or team sports where you can't control what other people are doing. Like you can only control so much. So, you go up there, you hit it when you can, you go up there, you catch the ball, you throw it to first base. If they miss it, that's them, not you. Like you can only control, like you have to do your job well, and anything else outside of your job, you can't do anything about it. Unlike basketball, you could literally control the whole game, right? I mean, like you could like, if you're LeBron James, you control the entire thing. If you're that guy, even in football, if you're the quarterback, you control everything. But in baseball, it's like, you're the center fielder. You catch the ball 4 times, it's hit to you. You go up 4 times at bat, and you don't make mistakes. You do your job, and then you can still lose, right? You can still be on a terrible team, and it doesn't matter. And it's that same kind of like mentality. And I love that because I never thought about that as a life lesson, but it's totally a life lesson because sometimes you could do everything right and it goes shitty, or or other people don't do what they're supposed to do, and there's nothing you can do about it at the end of the day, right?
Right. It's very liberating.
Yeah.
If you're in a relationship with somebody who doesn't get along with your immediate family, or vice versa, and one side is going to be like, your parents are doing this and that, or your wife is doing this and that, your girlfriend's doing this and that. That's on them, not me.
Yeah.
Right. I that's not my control. I could like for things to be different. I could like for everybody to get along, but in reality, it's beyond our control.
Yeah.
So it's very liberating, I think.
I think that is very liberating. I love that piece of advice. It's one of my favorite pieces of advice I've heard in a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I'm getting some of these ideas from Stoicism. This past fall, I really got into Stoicism a lot as a philosophy and a way of life. And a book I was going to recommend to you in return is How to Think Like a Roman Emperor by Donald Robertson, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's all about Marcus Aurelius. For those who aren't familiar, Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor. He was one of the most renowned, loved emperors of Rome because of his daily practice of Stoic philosophy. Like there was insurrections against him from his co-emperor. I forget the name right now. And after the Civil War was over, instead of punishing him, Marcus Aurelius showed clemency and mercy. And everybody couldn't believe it, but his whole reasoning was, you don't take anything anybody does to you personally. When you do that, you can still lead with empathy for anybody. It's very hard practices to come to. And, I'm not a Roman emperor. You're not a Roman emperor. Your son, as far as right now, is not a Roman emperor. But, we can all be leaders in our own right. So it's really important to practice empathy and to, I think with not being responsible for other people, it's also not taking things personal. I think they got to go hand in hand.
Which is really hard. That's something that I think I struggle with all the time. And but I think it's an important thing that, as I've gotten older, it's easier to deal with it. But still, it's difficult. It's a difficult lesson to learn.
Yeah. I think you got to really be an old man to really not take things personal from other people, especially you try to test you every once in a while. Even as your son will, I know he spars with you and everything, so he's going to continue to test you. And as he gets older, it's not going to be any easier for you.
Yeah.
So it's, I think it all ties in. And I think my third rule kind of goes hand in hand with everything we're talking about already is, always do your best while at the same time accepting that you may not succeed. So that liberates you from that disappointment that, that really tough sparring partner. I'm going to do my best when I spar with him. But he has more years experience than me. Maybe it's just a lucky move that he is able to outmaneuver me on. Whatever the case, I may not succeed. And that's okay, because I did my best.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that you're still succeeding, even if you don't win, because you're getting better. I mean, I had one of the early things I had to do with my son a lot was that I noticed that he was fighting kids that he could beat. And I said, why are you fighting these kids? You could beat them. They're not any kind of work. And so I said, you have to fight the kids that you can't beat, because those are the kids. That's how you're going to get better. The kids that are bigger than you or stronger than you or done it more or whatever, the ones that you're afraid of, those are the guys you need to fight, because when you're in a tournament or when you're fighting for real, that's like, that's when you're going to get better. Who was I listening to? I was listening to somebody and they were saying how you should always be the worst of your group of friends. And the reason why is that the reason being that you might be say all your friends are fast runners and you might be the slowest of the fast runners, but they'll make you faster. And so when you run in real life, you're going to be the fastest person. Or if you're playing chess or play basketball, or if you do whatever it is, you should be the worst so that they make you better, as opposed to being the opposite, which is being the best all the time. And then that means that you're not going to get better. You're just, like you're just regret. I think I actually think you regress to the mean. One thing I always say about chess is that you should be playing better people, because once you start playing worse people, you get worse and the other person gets better. And you kind of meet in the middle. And it's the same thing for basketball, same thing for baseball or any kind of sport or any kind of life thing. So, I think I love your advice about, and not taking it to like a defeat is not a defeat. The other thing that I say this, every other podcast is probably a drinking game by now, but one of the things I always say is that that one of my favorite motivational speakers, his name is Billy Alsbrook. He's this rapper out of Texas, but he became a motivational speaker. He talks a lot about how, and this is what I listen to with my son when we run, which is you can't be called a winner until you lose and come back. Anybody could win. Anybody can everybody keeps going when they're winning. That's easy. But the true winner is the one that wins or loses and then comes back again. That's the true winner. And I agree with him, that it's important that you keep going, you get back up, even if it looks like a loss. It could, like I was just, okay, sorry, the last thing I'll say about this, the craziest thing I just listened to was Kobe Bryant said that he didn't score a single point in 8th grade summer basketball league. And that's, and I was telling my son that I was like, dude, one of the greatest basketball players, we could debate what number he is, but one of the greatest basketball players, he played an entire summer, didn't score a point on his team. And, and he came back.
I think there's a similar, I think there's similar stories with Michael Jordan too.
He didn't make his JV team, right?
Failing multiple times.
Yeah. He didn't make his JV team like and he missed like 26,000 shots or whatever. But yeah, it's the same thing of like, but I'll say this is a separate piece of advice, but a great piece of advice from that thing was that Kobe Bryant's father told him that he loves him if he makes a lot of points or if he scores 0. And Kobe mentions that was the thing that really made him want to work harder. That he wanted it, like, so he went after that summer, he went and he started working out harder, like shooting the ball more, practicing harder. And I think that father's love is really important, that it wasn't like, oh, you're terrible, you suck, or, you know, like, or praising the other way, you know, like even my son, like in baseball, the mantra I keep telling him is, you know, if you hit a home run or if you strike out, what you need to tell yourself is it doesn't matter. I'm still the best player on this team. You know, and I tell him I love you if you go 0 for 4 or if you go 4 for 4. My love doesn't like get better with a better batting average, or it does, you know, or it doesn't fall apart if you have a horrible batting average. It's just, I support you, but I know what you're capable of, kind of thing, you know. But anyway.
Yeah, it takes the pressure off them to not feel like they have to, quote unquote, win every time.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, and I think as filmmakers, for us, like, we put our hopes and dreams into, you know, the concepts we come up with, you know, and we would love for nothing more in this world for it to be visible on a screen for everybody to watch, and also be lucrative as well, you know. But we always run the risk of getting a no, and multiple no's.
Yeah.
You were talking, I was listening to one of your previous episodes where you're talking about that. You've got like 1,000 no's before you get that one yes. You know, that principle of always doing your best and accepting that you may not win every time. It's transcendent to all matters of life in our pursuits.
Yeah. Even, I mean, I was telling my son about, you know, women that, like the incel guys, you know, they talk to one woman and the one woman says no, and all of a sudden they're like, all women suck. And I'm like, yeah, but you talked to one girl, and it's probably not even the right, like, you know, there's no chance with her probably with you. But, you know, like, you have to talk to everybody and you get to know everybody, and, you know, you ask like a bunch of girls, and, you know, like, you don't have to ask everybody, but you just ask, like, you just keep asking, and somebody eventually will go out with you. And by the way, if they say no, it probably was never meant to be anyway, right? Like, and it's okay. That's okay. True. There's nothing wrong with, you know, with no.
But I would argue that incels have, going back to rule number 2, have a personal responsibility to themselves to not blow the hell up every single time they get a no and want to drive over people in their cars.
Exactly. Yeah, because but it's also that they've like put so much, that one no that they got destroyed them, right? That made them like not be able to not feel to go like further with, you know, like with other people, because there are other people, like, there's so many people out there, you know, there's all different kinds of people. There's a person for everybody, I guarantee it.
Yeah, totally. But I can't imagine how difficult that must be with COVID, though.
Yeah, now COVID
in a cave somewhere.
Yeah, well, it's probably easier if you're an incel, because now you don't have to, you know, like, you don't have to worry about dating and stuff. So
pressure's off. There you go. Yeah, the pressure's off.
Yeah, the pressure's off. Now you can just Zoom people.
Yep, OnlyFans and whatever those other streamings are.
Yeah, OnlyFans. I want to start my own OnlyFans. I don't want to take off my clothes, but I just want to have OnlyFans.
I think that's called Patreon.
Yeah, but I want to be on OnlyFans.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to get a lot of hits. I mean, if you're at least not taking your shirt off, you have to at least do that to have somewhat a success in OnlyFans. I feel like
you're destroying my dreams, man. You're destroying my dreams. All right. Well, what's your next piece of advice?
Yeah. So these rules I came up with, except for the last one, I tried to tie them all in with each other. So the next one is really like a cognitive behavior therapy suggestion, which I've started to take on in my life as well, which is eliminate the word should from your vocabulary. Unless it's like a normal conversation, eliminate the word should from your vocabulary.
Should. Okay.
Yeah. Unless it's like, a normal conversation, like I should be home by 11 o'clock, that type of shit is okay. But when you start to say, I should have this, or she should do that, or they are not doing what they should be doing, blah, blah, blah. You start to develop neuroses because you expect everything to be a certain way.
Yeah.
And in reality, everybody is in their own individual bubble, right? In their own world, and only responsible for themselves. So it would be nice for things to happen. I would like it if that person does this. I would like it if that person didn't do that. I would like it if my food would come on time at the restaurant. You know, there's that makes it a little more objective. But if you're saying should, it develops that entitlement that a lot of people have, and I'm one of them. I'm a prototypical millennial. I grew up with a lot of entitlement stuff. So these words of wisdom I'm passing on to your son, it will be stuff I'll pass on to my son, and things that I still need to work on for myself.
Yeah, I love the should. I love the idea of getting rid of the should, because I do agree. I mean, I think it kind of goes to what your second piece of advice about controlling what you can control. And when you say should, you start to take off the responsibility of what you could do or can't control, what you can and can't control in your own life, right?
Yeah, I should be able to beat my opponent. If I don't, then I'm a loser.
Yeah.
Right. I should be able to get that promotion. If I don't, I'm not worthy. I'm not capable.
Yeah.
But it's really, you know what? I'm going to go into that interview. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to look my best. I'm going to sound the best. And if I don't make it, it's not because I suck. It's because maybe somebody else was more qualified. Maybe they hired internally. Who knows?
Yeah, actually, that's really interesting.
Did.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was done there. You can go.
I was going to say, it's just like pitching when you. A lot of people who believe when you go like for pitch, like not pitching like baseball, but pitching like film stuff or TV. Oh. People always think that it's that like it's just a matter of like how good your idea is, whether they pass or not pass. But what I students, all this is that these executives have like a really, really small window of stuff that they want. And if your thing doesn't hit exactly what they want, they're not interested.
Yeah.
And so like, it's never about like, so like, for what you're saying, like, it's like, the writer or whoever is feeling like, oh, they should take my project. My project's amazing. But it's like, it's not, them saying no is not a matter of, that like it wasn't good. It just means that it wasn't right for them at that moment, at that time. It doesn't mean it can't be okay like a month from now or a year from now or never. But it's like it's that same attitude. So like you just had to go into these meetings and just most of the time it's not going to work. Most of the time you're just going to talk and talk and talk and nothing will happen, and you just got to move on. Even for film funding, I was just talking to my friend about this. Like I talked to you have to talk to like 50 people. 49 of them don't have the money or not going to give you the money, and it's just a waste of my dinner.
Right.
But that one, I have to talk to all 49 before I could find that one that's real, the one that will give me some money and that has money, wants to invest. And I don't know which of the 50 guys it is, and I have to go through all of them. And it's just what it is, right? And so I really like I really like getting rid of should. I think that the world would be a better place if we did that.
Yeah, I mean, it's transcended to every scale of the human condition.
Yeah.
One-on-one interactions to nations to warring families or tribes. Everything.
Yeah.
It's all there. It's just a bunch of we're all neurotic, and I think the older we get, the more neurotic we get, unless we're self-disciplined. And I think taking on philosophy is a great way to live your life, because they're all life lessons and practical wisdom.
Yeah,
it's just hard.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because my one rule is that the moment someone says that it used to be better, I think they've gotten old. I remember what it was like before.
What used to be better?
Like when people say, "Oh, it used to be better because this," or "It was better when I was a kid," or "It was better." I'm like, no, it wasn't. Like, what are you, crazy? It wasn't. I mean, like, like, for example, like everyone says it used to be better. I was like, I remember, I was a kid in the 80s, but like, I hear stories. People are doing coke in the, lunchroom. Like, is that really better? Or like the 1950s, like Black people couldn't drink out of the same water fountain. Was that really better? Like, I don't think it was better. And like 1910, like women couldn't vote. Like, was that better? You're like, no, like it's gotten better. Like it's gotten like we have less crime. I always think like I have high hopes for the kids of the future, and I always think it's always getting better. But to your point, like I think that when people start to think that that it used to be better, I always like, oh, you've gotten old. You've lost that.
Right.
That Go ahead.
Yeah, I would add to that people say things have gotten worse. You know, kids nowadays are horrible, or you know, the times we're living in nowadays are horrible. You know, we've been, as civilizations, been dealing with the same stuff for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Now I go to bring it back to Marcus Aurelius. There was insurrections in his empire. They were living through a plague called the Antonine Plague for like 15 years, wiped out so much of the population in the Roman Empire. You know, all this was happening, and you know, you had politicians who were crooked. You know, you had everyday people just trying to live their lives, blah blah blah. All the same conditions have been going on for thousands of years. So, you know, it's all relative.
Yeah,
You know,
everything's relative.
and every generation has high hopes for their next generation, which is why we're doing this podcast for your son.
Although I
you
do
know,
really, I
Because
feel
we
like
always.
I feel like our kids are going to be the next greatest generation. Have you ever heard of the book, The 4-Generation Cycle? There's
No, but I'm going to say it again.
the 4-Generation Cycle.
Generation cycle.
It's a sociologist who basically studied American history and found out that American history is always in this 4-generation cycle. Like every 4 generations, there's always the same 4 generations every time, and it repeats itself. So the 4th generation is always the greatest generation. So the first fourth generation was the American Revolutionary generation. The next one was the generation during the Civil War. The next one was the World War II generation. And the kids now, like your kid's probably the youngest of that, but they're like just about to, they're like in high school, and they're like going to be the greatest. Like these kids are the greatest generation in terms of like, but the one scary thing about the greatest generation has always been that they've been marked by major wars. Like in each of those situations, they've been marked by these world-changing wars, like the American Revolutionary War, Civil War. Not Civil War didn't change the world, but changed America for sure. And then the World War II was obviously a ginormous war that changed, you know, the face of our world. But yeah, these kids are like, you know, like, and the same things that they're saying about the kids now are the same things they said about the greatest generation, the last one in terms of the World War II generation. Like they said that they couldn't win the war, that they're all pansies or whatever. They said that they were like too coddled. Like they couldn't, how can they fight the Nazis if they're being coddled? And then they, you know, they not only fought the Nazis, like they killed them, right? They won the war.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that these kids, you know, when I look at these kids, I think that they're amazing. Like my son was, we were at a Christmas display and we saw like a snowman, like, well, because we're in LA, so there's no real snowman, but we see the fake snowman. And I said, "Oh, look at the snowman." And
you
he
mean
said,
snow person, right?
Yes, yeah, that's what he said. And I couldn't believe it. I was amazed. I mean, I was touched because, I mean, I don't even think he understands the gender politics at this point, but I think that it's important that he wants to be inclusive and that it's not even a big deal to him. But I mean, you know, like when we were kids, like being gay in school, you get beat up for, right? Like nowadays, whoever you want to be, and it's way cooler. Like I could hug a dude. Like remember, I was trying to tell my son, I was like, I couldn't even hug a guy because I would be seen as gay.
Without being called gay, yeah. I like to watch, you know, movies and shows from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And I've heard so many times being referenced, like, this person's gay as like a joke in the movie, you know, and like they're embarrassed by it. You know, it's totally a different narrative now, which, yes, is a wonderful thing that, you know, gay people don't have to feel ostracized for something like that.
They could just be themselves, and it doesn't matter. I mean, like, who cares, right? Like, and that's actually going back to should. That's like people who say, well, they should be like normal people. I'm just like, well, like, worry about yourself, dude. Stop, you know, like, worry about yourself. Who cares?
Yeah, I think there's a proverb. I always forget the wording of it, but the proverb is about like, you know, sand or glass in your eye, but not worrying about I can't remember it exactly. Now I sound silly because I'm not pronouncing the proverb correctly, but it's something like that. You know, don't worry about others, worry about yourself.
Yeah,
it all circles back to that.
Exactly.
It's such an amazing principle. Well, here's another one from Jesus that said, "He who is without sin, let him be the first to cast a stone."
Yeah, exactly.
You know? I'm not a Christian, but you know, I love words of wisdom. You know, so. That line has always stuck out to me. You know, we're all sinners in our own right, and we're all righteous people. And well, for the most part, not everybody is righteous. The path of righteousness, righteousness is not a everybody thing. but hopefully we can all strive to get there.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
that's idealist in me.
Not to get way off topic, but that was one of the big things I thought that President Trump or former President Trump really changed the country was that before, even if you were kind of a bastard guy, we talked about trying to be better country, be the beacon of freedom, to be the best in the world in terms of equality. Even if it wasn't happening, that's what they were talking about.
Right.
Which and Trump and his people stopped talking about that. That was not important anymore. And I think that there's a big loss when we're not even striving to be better, that more equal, more free, and that, or because for them it became like, we need more, we want it to be the way it used to be. Well, it wasn't free before, whereas people that I didn't always love, they would talk about we're the freest country in the world. We're the beacon of light in the world. Like, I never heard anybody in the last administration talk like that. And I think that is important to our soul, as a country.
Right.
And I granted, it never was like that, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I teach rhetoric to my high school English students. They're seniors. Well, first semester I teach rhetoric. And my major emphasis really is all about that rhetoric that that power of rhetoric the president has over the nation. That's why I feel very hopeful with Joe Biden, and I'm impressed so far with his leadership since taking office only 3 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
I feel like the rhetoric has changed, from the top down in our nation, and that's, it feels good.
Well, even
we did lose that under Trump.
Yeah, even before he was inaugurated, he did that whole speech about COVID, and where about the COVID victims who died, and I was like, why didn't we should have had this 6 months ago, where somebody says this is terrible, we need to work together, we're Americans, it's really easy,
right.
It's full of cliches.
It's funny you bring that up, because when I saw that happen, I was surprised at first, because I've been conditioned for the past 4 years to not take anything under a ceremonious measure or consideration for people who've been hurt in some capacity or another. Like, under Trump's administration, we had a ton of mass shootings, and there was never any memorial for them. Obama went to the Sandy Hook a funeral for different children and stuff. It takes a president to have that type of rhetoric of compassion and empathy, that it trickles down. And, I think it goes up too, because, I think there's everyday people, you and me, who are also fathers, we want to set the right example. And, so often that is being compassionate and showing empathy. Just like when you say to your son, I love you no matter what, that gives him all the strength to be a good person. If a president says we're going to get through this, and shows that, that compassion and, leadership, then I think the nation feels good. I mean, after 9/11, George W. Bush, a lot of people didn't like him, but he did get to unite the nation for a little while after 9/11.
Well, because one New Yorker was like all of us. And that's what I was missing this, with COVID, even when the beginning, when everyone in New York City was dying, it was like, oh no, they're just New Yorkers. That's New York's problem, not my problem. And that was really shocking. That was the first time I thought this country's in trouble, because, any other time it would have been, this is terrible. We need to help New York. They're Americans, just like California fires is the same thing. It's like, oh, that's California. Those are liberals in California. They deserve this. That was what's happening. And it's like, no, dude, we're in the same, if there's a hurricane or people are dying or sick or hurt or whatever, it's like, we're supposed to be on the same team. And you're talking like we're on different teams. Even the president was talking like that, right? He's like, you should shoot the forest or something. I'm like, what are you talking about? How about I'm sorry, this is terrible, ridiculous. Right? That's but you're right. It's like, and I do think it goes both ways, because I think that a lot of the people who fell for that QAnon and all that stuff, they've lost that idea of that we're on the same team too, right? That you and I and everybody else is and actually, side note, one of the things I've been really pushing, and I think that would be really interesting, is I think Americans need to do service together. Actually have
need to do what?
They actually have a mandatory service of some course, whether military or service in national parks or whatever, government service, because I feel like You know,
Yeah.
my son in California, if he's in a unit with a kid from West Virginia, you know, if nothing else, my son won't think every West Virginian is an idiot. And that guy from West Virginia won't think every Californian is a liberal or a libtard, or, you know, like that there's a cool West Virginian and there's a cool Californian. And I think that changes something when you know somebody from that place. It's not like they're all bastards, but it's like I have some familiarity with those people and they're just like
Right.
that, you know.
I think I totally agree with what you're saying. I don't think that would work from like a federal
No, that would never
mandate,
work.
but I think no, of course not. But in the educational system could work. The states would have to come, because you know states control their education. States would have to come together to you know really value that. It's idealistic, but I think that I still think that's a little bit more practical. At least to every student in high school needs to commit to a set amount of hours doing some form of community service, whether that's in your neighborhood or they pay for you to fly to some other state and do some active service for people who just got devastated by natural disaster. I think that's more practical. It's still idealistic, but it could be done, you know.
Yeah.
Once COVID is over, at least.
Once COVID, yeah. Well, let's hear your last piece of advice.
All right, cool. So this one's a little bit different from the other four, but very, very important as, you know, a future potential father and husband, to always put your family first, your chosen family, because you'll have your biological family that you were born into, and you'll always have that connection to them, but you make a committed choice to start your own family, to marry that your spouse and create a family together. You know, it's always important to put them first. And I think it's, you know, just very important. I felt like it's different from the other ones I came up with, just because I feel like it's, I don't know, just from a father to son narrative, you know, because, you know, as men, we're still going to rebel in our own way. We're going to want certain things to be a certain way with the shoulds and everything. So it's just important to remember that. And I mean, I could go into a whole slew of, you know, subplots with that principle about spending time with your child and everything. I was listening to your podcast. I forget who your guest was, but it was recent. And you were talking about he does a lot of after school activities with his son, like karate and music and everything. And you know, they just stop every once in a while and they're just not doing anything, and they enjoy that with each other. So, and I think with COVID, it's really helpful to do that as well. But, you know, once we're not in COVID anymore and life goes back to a little bit normal of extracurriculars and, you know, schools opening back up and everything, it's just important to, you know, make that time with each other.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's great advice. I mean, one of the things that, you know, I spent a ton of time with my kid, but it's different now because we're spending more time and we're not always like you talked about during regular times. I'm just driving him around from this place to this place, this place to this place, and we're talking but we're mostly just, you know, he's in school all day, but now he's next to me all day. We have conversations. We get to, like, you know. But the other thing I love is that when we go out in the day, I see a lot of dads with the kids more than before. I think the dads are home more and they get to play. You see them like at the park. Like I used to go to the park every day. And I know for a fact that they weren't there, you know, like, but now because of COVID, they get to spend time. And I think, I hope that doesn't change, because I do think that's really important. I do think a lot of dads fail at their job, like in terms of fail at, like, of being a parent, of being a dad, of being a father, and wanting to be around, you know, that it's like they've taken the path that the job is the most important thing. And one of my you know, when I talk to a lot of older folks, especially guys that were really successful, like I know this I was just talking to this advertising executive who's really famous, and he was telling me that his biggest regret, he's like 80 something, and his biggest regret was that he didn't spend time with his kids, you know, very successful, lots of money, and that, like, he had to get to know them again when they were adults. And by then it was almost too late. Like, I mean, they had a good relationship. It's not like they had a terrible relationship, but that, you know, that he missed all that time and now you can't get it back. And their relationship is so different now. You know, and
I have that regret sometimes with my son, because when he was in his first year of life, I was very active in starting to pursue taking my first film, Our Harlem, and turning it into a short script. Into a short script and then producing it into a short film. So he was like 6 to 8 months at that time when I was really heavy into it. So, I'd come home from work, and then soon after, I mean, I would go work with my other writing partner on that for a couple hours. And that was pretty often. So, we're always going to wish for more time, and me compared to somebody, to a dad who, God forbid, got locked up the first year of his son's life. He didn't even get to see the first year of his son's life, and that's heartbreaking. I'll share a sad story. I'm not going to say his name, but I've worked with this. He's probably like in his early 30s. This young man who became a friend of mine. We worked together in an acting program every June for like the past 5-6 years. He's got a son who's about 5 years old, I think, and a daughter who's like maybe over 1 now. And he just went to, I don't know the full details of, his situation, but he did go to jail like last summer of June. And as far as I know, he's still in jail because of the crime that he committed. He could be doing some serious time. And that's heartbreaking for me. I mean, I have a son who's 2 years old almost. And, I can't imagine that type of heartbreak, not just for myself, but for my son who would grow up without a father. It's, I think one of my most grateful things about being a father, and it comes with putting the family first, is I empathize so much more with other parents now. Like I'll watch something on TV that includes the parents with a child, and I'll start tearing up. It hits me right away. It's
funny because
very palpable thing.
Same thing with I love true crime, and when my kid was a baby, especially, I'd watch like shows about baby, like especially boy babies, but like kids being hurt.
Yeah.
And I couldn't watch for a while. I couldn't watch it because like I was like, oh, this is too, I can't handle like Sandy Hook. Actually, Sandy Hook was a big deal for me because my kid was literally that age when that happened, and I remember being like, I remember taking him to like the daycare at that time, like that day or the next day or whatever. And I was just like, I couldn't imagine all these kids being killed. Like it was like, and I remember thinking like, I can't believe we're not doing gun control or something or stop like, like that. This is like I thought killing like little baby kids would be enough to like end everything, or not end it, but at least like try to do something. Yeah. But apparently like it turned out not to be the case. But I remember that was like the first time, like, because, like by the time Columbine, I was already out of high school. I was in college. And by the, everything else, I was already out of school. And so I was never in that, I never had to do like a active shooter drill in school, but then,
right. Yeah.
I remember my kid, like I mean, your kid's too young, but I actually bought my kid, like after all the shooting last year before COVID, I bought my kid there's like a backpack that you could wear that has an AR proof, a plate in the backpack. And so that if you get shot, it would like, in theory, it should help you. So like, like I was like, it's crazy that I'm buying this backpack, but I was like, if I don't buy it and something happens, I'm going to like feel terrible like that. And so like, I was like, it's crazy that we have to buy, like, but that's the same, like, it's like that realization that like, that like these kids could be taken away from you. And those shootings at school mean a lot more to me now, because it's like every day I worry about, things that could happen at the school, and thinking about ways like, I think we're about the same age. Like I worried about being bombed by the Soviets, like the nuclear bomb, right? And there's nothing we could do about that.
You're a few years old. You're a few years older than me. I didn't have to deal with that too much. When I was in high school, we had bomb threats when I was in high school.
Oh,
that was like that was like the fullest extent for me.
I mean,
we didn't have to worry about the Soviets.
Well, I was toward the end of that, so like, I mean, we had only a little bit of it. Like in kindergarten, they have active shooter drills. They have like plans of like my kid knows what to do, and like I even talked to my kid about what to do and how to like, I'm like, grab your backpack and run, put it on your back and run, or hide and put your like backpack in front of you, like, or just get the hell out of there. But that's crazy.
I mean, but I respect you so much for having those conversations with him, because, a lot of parents, I'm assuming, don't have those types of conversations with their children, and there's that word, should. They ought to. It would be in their best interest to have a conversation with their kids about, survival I should say, methods to making out of a situation alive.
Yeah.
And plus taking martial arts, I'm sure, helps as well.
Yeah, definitely. Being able to protect yourself, I think, is really important. But my son and I are very much into like end of the world things and survival stuff. So we're pretty fun. Like, for example, I'll share one with you. Have you ever heard of the thumb test? You know what a thumb test is for nuclear bombs? So if you're within, so if you see a nuclear bomb, like a mushroom cloud, and assume you're not vaporized right away because you're too close to it, you put your thumb out and you if your thumb covers the mushroom cloud, you have more time to get out of there. If your thumb covers the nuclear, like the mushroom cloud, you have like time to get away. Like you have time to.
If you can.
Yeah. But if your thumb is smaller, you probably need to find some place immediately that would be safe to get out of the whatever is coming your way. So like getting underground, getting behind like big walls, or someplace that you're not going to get, like you won't get killed by the blast, but the radiation and the wind and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's like one of the things.
Yeah. So I don't really worry about that stuff as much as crazy Trumpers every once in a while.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show you something I have real quick. After this happened to be in the same time. After the attack on the Capitol, this had just come in the mail for me. This is like the only half of it. So for my most recent promotional film I just shot, the main character used the spear in it. This is only half of it. So I happened to get it in the mail like around the same time that the attack on the Capitol happened. So I was like, if anybody messes with me, man, I have this long ass spear that can just go right through them. You know.
And speaking of,
because
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know, a spear for me, I feel like is a safe bet because I don't own any guns, so I get to keep my distance from an attacker, and as long as they're not equipped with martial arts training, I have a pretty good chance of surviving. Unless they have a gun, then I'm probably not. I'm not too well off.
Well, speaking of the Capitol and the whole insurrection there, I've been wanting to share this advice, so I'm glad it came up. So my advice for everybody is that this country, we have freedom of speech, but we don't have freedom of consequence. So that means that if you say something stupid or you do something stupid, you could still be fired from your job. You could still lose your friends or lose respect. And I think a lot of the people who got caught up in that and the QAnon and all that stuff is that they thought that freedom of speech meant that they're also freedom of consequence. And that's not true, right? It just means you can't get arrested for your thought, like for your speech, but it doesn't mean that you can't like lose everything else in your life. And I think more people in this country need to understand that, I can't go around saying the N word, and that I think it's okay. I think it's no problem. I just can't be arrested for it. That's all. Right. But
yeah, I mean, that's what cancel culture kind of takes care of with that regard as a consequence for your words.
You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose some friends. You're going to lose respect from people. And that's, that's fine. That's what it is. Right. And I think that's important. I think a lot of people don't understand that idea of freedom of speech is freedom of speech is limited anyway. Right. You can't say fire in a crowded movie theater, for example. Right. So there's always limits on all kinds of freedoms anyway. All right. Well, it was really great to talk to you, Michael. I really appreciate your time. Yeah. Love your advice. And
likewise, Coach G.
And please, everybody, rate, review, subscribe to this podcast. This is a labor of love. This is for my son, but it's for all of you. I hope everyone gets pieces of advice that will help them as well, because I know it helped me. I'm gonna get rid of should out of my dialogue or out of my everyday speech.
Nice.
I think that's an important thing.
Me too.
All right.
Me too.
Thank you, everybody.
Can I put?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was gonna put in the plug.
Okay. Sorry. I always ask people and I totally forgot. So I'm so sorry. How can people follow you? How can people see your work?
Well, thank you for asking, Koji. So, like I said briefly before, I have a short film called Our Harlem. I have a short film version of it. Koji has seen it. He liked it. So if you want to check it out, it's not streamable yet, but if you want to join my Facebook page for it, it's facebook.com/Our Harlem Film. You can see links to, clips and stuff, and soon I'll be premiering the full film.
Okay.
So
Great.
find me that way.
And I'll put that link in the show notes so people can see that as well. What about you personally? Do you have a website or anything, or?
Not yet. I mean, pretty much I have a Vimeo page up, but my Facebook, Our Harlem page,
Is your main
will
page,
connect to my Vimeo anyways.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So eventually a website will be ready to go.
Okay. Great. If you ever need any help with that, let me know. I've done a lot of websites. All right, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it.
That.
And sorry about that. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.